It was past midnight when my phone rang. At first, I thought it was a wrong number. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart dropped. It was my granddaughter's teacher, and what she said next made me jump out of bed, trembling. You know that strange feeling you get when you just know something's wrong? That night I had it. My name's Margaret. I'm 72, and I live alone in a small town where nothing ever really happens. Until that night, my granddaughter Lily is 10 years old. My sunshine, my little angel. She lives with her parents a few miles away, but she often spends weekends at my house. She's smart, kind, always top of her class. So when her teacher called me at midnight, I knew this wasn't just some casual concern. "Mrs. Thompson?" the voice said. It was shaky, almost whispering. "It's Miss Carter, Lily's teacher. I'm so sorry to call you this late, but I didn't know who else to reach." My first thought was, did something happen to Lily? "Is she okay?" I asked, already half crying. "Yes, I think so," she said. "But something strange happened tonight. I think someone was at the school, in her classroom." Now that made no sense. It was midnight. Why would anyone be in a 4th grade classroom in the middle of the night? Miss Carter continued. "I was working late, grading papers in the teacher's lounge. The cameras picked up motion in Lily's class. When I checked, I saw drawings, new ones, but they weren't there before." "Drawings?" I asked, confused. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "They looked like Lily's style. Same handwriting, same details, but the date written on the corner was tomorrow's date." Now, I didn't know what to think. Maybe the teacher was tired, maybe a prank, but something about her tone, the way her words quivered, made my stomach twist. "Can I come see it?" I asked. Miss Carter hesitated. "The school's locked at night. But if you come early morning, I'll let you in before anyone else arrives." I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window watching the streetlight flicker outside, listening to the ticking of the clock. Every minute felt longer. When the sky started turning gray, I got in my car and drove to the school. Miss Carter was already there, pale, nervous, clutching a folder to her chest. She unlocked the classroom door and whispered, "Look at the board." On the whiteboard were drawings, dozens of them. Children, houses, a family. And there, right in the center, was one picture that made my blood run cold. It was me, but not just me smiling like in her usual sketches. No, in this drawing I was lying on the floor. My eyes were closed, and there was a red marker stain around my head. I stared at it, frozen. "Are you sure Lily drew this?" I whispered. Miss Carter nodded. I checked. Same art style, her name written at the bottom, even the little heart she always puts beside her signature. But the thing that sent chills through me, the date in the corner. It said November 8th, tomorrow. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe she drew something strange in class and Miss Carter just found it late. But then Miss Carter said something that made my hands shake. "Mrs. Thompson, the classroom was locked all day, and the janitor swears he didn't see those papers when he cleaned at 6 p.m. Someone must have come back after hours." "Who has the key?" I asked. "Only me and the principal," she said. "But the cameras show nothing." The footage skips between 11:45 and 12:05, like it was erased. I felt dizzy. Something wasn't right. That morning, I decided to visit Lily. When I got to her house, she was eating breakfast like nothing happened. "Morning, Grandma," she said, running to hug me. I tried to sound normal. "Hey, sweetheart. Did you draw anything new at school?" She nodded. "Uh-huh. I made one about you. You're sleeping peacefully." "Did Miss Carter show you?" "Sleeping peacefully." My heart skipped a beat. "Why did you draw that, honey?" I asked. She smiled. "Because the man told me to." I froze. "What man?" "The one who stands near the window in class. He said he's your friend." Now, I know kids have wild imaginations, but the way she said it, calm, certain, made my skin crawl. I didn't want to scare her, so I just asked gently, "What does he look like?" She thought for a second. "He's tall. He wears a hat, Sometimes he waves at me when the teacher isn't looking. I tried to laugh it off, but something deep inside told me this wasn't just imagination. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I called Miss Carter again and asked if we could check the security footage one more time, the part where it skipped. We met at the school after hours. The janitor unlocked the door for us, muttering about the creepy noises he'd been hearing lately. Miss Carter loaded the footage. We watched the video second by second. At 11:44, the classroom was empty, then static, and at 12:06, the papers were suddenly on the desk. But what caught my attention wasn't the drawings. It was a reflection in the glass of the classroom door. Faint, blurry, but unmistakable. A man's silhouette, tall, wearing a hat. Miss Carter gasped. "Did you see that?" I nodded slowly. My heart was pounding. We zoomed in, but the face was impossible to see clearly. Could it be the janitor? She whispered. "No," I said. "He's shorter and older." Something in my chest tightened. That drawing, the man, the date, tomorrow. What was going to happen tomorrow? I didn't want to take chances. That night, I took Lily to stay at my house. We watched movies, baked cookies, tried to act normal. But around midnight, she woke up screaming. "He's outside," she cried. I rushed to the window. And I swear, under the flickering streetlight, there was a shadow of someone standing near the fence. Then just like that, it was gone. I called the police. They came, checked the yard, found nothing. But when they looked under the window, they found footprints. Men's footprints. Fresh. The next morning, we got a call. "Miss Carter again." Her voice was shaking even worse than before. "Mrs. Thompson, the principal just checked the classroom again. There's another drawing." My heart pounded. "What does it show this time?" It's Lily." She's crying. And behind her is the same man with the hat. I felt my knees weaken. "I'm coming right now." When I arrived, Miss Carter handed me the new paper. At the bottom, in small shaky letters, were the words, "He's looking for Grandma." I felt a chill go down my spine. I turned to Miss Carter, terrified. What if this isn't Lily drawing at all? We decided to show the police. They examined the handwriting, the ink, the paper. And then the officer said something that sent shivers through both of us. "Ma'am, this isn't recent ink. It's from an old pen, the type they stopped making about 20 years ago." I went home, shaken. That night I went through my attic. Boxes of old family things, letters, photos. And in one box, I found something that made everything click. An old photo of my husband, tall, wearing a hat. He had died 20 years ago, in November, the same date Lily wrote on her first drawing. I sat there, holding that picture, unable to breathe. Maybe he was watching over us. Maybe he was warning us. But one thing's for sure. That night I learned that love, protection, and even fear don't always end when life does. If you want to hear what happened the next night, make sure you subscribe. You won't believe what we found on the camera. After that night, I thought everything was over. But the next morning, when I checked the security camera at my house, I realized it wasn't just a dream. Someone, or something, really had been there. And what I saw in that footage made me drop my coffee and scream. My name's Margaret. And for the past few days, my life has felt like something straight out of a nightmare. First, my granddaughter Lily's teacher called me at midnight about drawings that showed things before they even happened. Then we saw the shadow of a man wearing a hat, the same one my late husband used to wear. At first, I thought it was just memories, or fear playing tricks. But when I checked the security camera from my house, I knew I was wrong. The footage started normally. You could see the front porch, the old oak tree, the mailbox at the end of the driveway. But at 11:58 p.m., a flicker appeared on the screen, static for 2 seconds. Then a tall, blurry figure standing near the fence. I paused it, zoomed in. The hat, the same shape, the same stance. I felt my skin crawl. And then, something even stranger. The figure turned its head toward the camera, but the face was completely white. No eyes, no mouth, just blank. I wanted to stop watching, but I couldn't. At 12:03, the doorbell rang in the footage. Only once, and then silence. I never heard it ring that night. But there it was, clear as day. I replayed it again and again. No one answered the door. No one left. But at 12:07, a soft light flickered in the living room, the same room where Lily had been sleeping. I ran to check on Lily. She was still sleeping peacefully. Her blanket slightly moved, like she was dreaming. But the next morning, she said something that froze me. "Grandma," she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "I saw Grandpa last night." My heart dropped. You saw Grandpa?" She nodded. "He told me to stay near you. That someone is trying to take your picture." I felt a chill run through me. "Take my picture? Why?" She shrugged. "He said if the man gets your picture, you'll have to go with him." That same afternoon, I drove back to the school. I needed answers. Miss Carter met me at the gate, her face pale. "Mrs. Thompson," she said quietly. "The principal asked me to take down the drawings. But there's a new one." I followed her into the classroom. On the board, taped right in the center, was another piece of paper. This time, it wasn't drawn with crayons. It was a photograph. A photo of me, standing at my window from last night, taken from outside. My breath caught in my throat. "Who took this?" Miss Carter shook her head. "I don't know. It was on the teacher's desk this morning when I arrived." I took the photo home and stared at it for hours. Same window, same curtain, even the small crack on the glass. But there was one detail that made my stomach twist. Behind me, in the reflection, was that tall man with the hat. That night, I called the police again. They took the photo for evidence, but the officer didn't seem convinced. "Could be a prank," he said. "Maybe a neighbor," but I knew better. Because when they left, I found a note slipped under my door. In shaky handwriting, it said, "Stop looking. He wants you to remember." I didn't understand. Remember what? I searched every corner of my house. The attic, the basement, even the garden shed. That's when I found an old wooden box tucked behind a stack of newspapers. Inside were letters from my late husband. But one envelope stood out. No stamp, no date. Just my name, Margaret, written in smudged ink. I opened it slowly. "If you're reading this, it means he found you." I thought I buried the truth with me, but I was wrong. "He's not done yet. Don't trust the man in the hat. He wears my face, but he's not me." My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped it. The next day, I showed the letter to Miss Carter. She stared at it for a long time. "This handwriting," she whispered. "I've seen it before." She pulled out a folder full of old records from the school's history. "Before it was rebuilt, this land used to be an orphanage," she explained. "One of the teachers back then was a man named Harold Thompson, my husband's name, but he died long before the orphanage closed," she said quietly. "They said he was a kind man, but some of the reports say a few children went missing before the fire." I felt my knees weaken. "That can't be true." Miss Carter looked away. Sometimes the past leaves a stain that never really fades. That night, I set up all the cameras I had. Living room, porch, hallway, even Lily's room. I had to know what was happening. At exactly 12 a.m., every single light in the house flickered. The temperature dropped. Then, the camera in Lily's room started glitching. Static. Then, a figure appeared beside her bed. Tall, hat, watching. I ran in screaming, grabbed Lily, and flipped on the lights. But there was no one there. Only the curtains moving, and on her pillow a folded paper. I unfolded it with shaking hands. It was another drawing. This time it showed me and Lily standing outside a burning house. And beneath it, in Lily's handwriting, were 3 words. "It happens tonight." I called the police, the fire department, everyone. They came, checked the wiring, gas lines. Nothing wrong. They thought I was crazy. But around 3 a.m., I smelled smoke. The outlet in the living room had sparked, catching the curtains on fire. If I hadn't been awake, we would have both been trapped. The firefighters said we were lucky. Just a few more minutes, and the house would have been gone. I held Lily tight as they put out the flames. Her eyes filled with tears. Grandpa saved us, didn't he? I didn't know how to answer. Maybe he did. Maybe his ghost wasn't haunting us. Maybe he was warning us. After that night, I moved Lily and her parents away from that town. The drawing stopped. The phone never rang again at midnight. But sometimes when the clock strikes 12, I still see the porch light flicker. Just once, like someone's letting me know they're still watching over us. If you want to hear what I found inside the burnt remains of that house, subscribe. The truth is darker than you think. When the fire trucks left and the smoke finally cleared, I thought the nightmare was over. But inside those ashes, I found something that changed everything I believed about my husband, my daughter, and even about little Lily. What I found that morning didn't haunt me. It broke me. My name's Margaret Thompson. Last week, my home nearly burned down. The whole town thought it was an accident. An old socket, a spark, bad luck. But standing in that black dust, I realized the fire wasn't random. It was hiding a secret someone wanted me to never uncover. When the firefighters left, I started digging through what was left. Bits of wood, melted photo frames, burnt paper. And then, under the broken floorboard near the living room wall, I saw it. A small metal box, still warm. It wasn't part of the house wiring. It looked planted. I pulled it out with my gloves and opened it. Inside were old photographs, ones I'd never seen before. My husband, Harold, but not the smiling man from our wedding albums. He was standing in front of the old orphanage, the same one Miss Carter said burned down decades ago. And beside him, a little girl with bright hair. The name on the back said, Lillian C. Lily's full name is Lillian Carter Thompson. Miss Carter, Lily's teacher. Same last name. My stomach turned. I called Miss Carter right away. When she picked up, I could hear silence on the other end. Like she already knew why I was calling. "Where did you get that photo?" she asked before I even said hello. "I found it in my house," I answered. "In a box that somehow survived the fire." There was a pause. Then she whispered, "I think it's time you knew the truth." She came over an hour later, eyes red, hands shaking. "I didn't tell you everything about the orphanage," she said. "My grandmother, her name was Lillian Carter too, was one of the last children there before it burned down. She always said a teacher saved her that night, a man named Harold Thompson." My heart skipped. "My Harold?" She nodded. "He pulled her out of the fire, but everyone else thought he'd died inside, so he hadn't." Miss Carter went on. "She said he disappeared right after. No one ever found his body. She never knew why." I stared at the photograph again. If that was true, then the man I buried years later wasn't Harold at all. But before I could process it, she pulled another paper from her bag. A faded adoption certificate. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband adopted a baby girl secretly. Right after that fire, he told the agency he'd lost his wife in the blaze." The name on the paper hit me like lightning. Emma Thompson. Emma, my daughter, Lily's mother. My hands started shaking so hard the paper almost slipped. "You're saying my husband lied about our whole life?" Miss Carter's eyes filled. "I don't think he lied out of cruelty. I think he was protecting you." She explained that Harold had found baby Emma in the ruins of the orphanage. Her parents were gone, and the records were destroyed. He'd already lost his first wife to illness that same year. So he took the baby, raised her as ours, and never told anyone. All these years, I thought we were a normal family. But that meant Lily's bloodline wasn't mine. Yet somehow, she'd inherited my habits, my expressions, my love for baking, and my fears. Maybe family isn't what's in the blood. It's what stays when everything else burns. While we talked, Lily came running from the porch. "Grandma! The men are here again." 2 officers were outside. One handed me a sealed plastic bag. Inside was a piece of film the firefighters found wedged behind a burned beam. They said it looked decades old. We took it to a photo shop in town. When the pictures developed, I could barely breathe. Each frame showed Harold carrying a baby from a burning building, the orphanage, and behind him, another man, his twin brother. I never knew Harold had a twin. In the last picture, the twin was staring straight at the camera, holding something. A photograph of me. On the back, written in ash dark ink, it said, "Only one of us deserved her." Everything snapped together. The strange letters, the shadow in the hat, the man in the reflection. It wasn't Harold's ghost. It was his brother. He'd survived the fire, obsessed, jealous, hiding for years. And now he wanted to destroy what Harold had built. Our family. Police later found remains of a small shed behind the old orphanage site. Inside were burned personal items, including the same type of camera used to take that photo of me at my window. He had been watching. The fire at my house wasn't an accident. He'd broken in that night, trying to finish what he started. But something or someone stopped him. Maybe fate. Maybe Harold himself. Weeks later, Lily started drawing again. But this time, the pictures were peaceful. Family dinners, sunny skies, no red marks, no shadows. One day, she drew Harold with a smile. She said, "Grandpa told me he can rest now. The bad man's gone." I didn't ask how she knew. Some truths don't need proof. They just need peace. The fire took my house, but it gave me back the truth. Harold wasn't a ghost or a liar. He was a man who tried to save a life and paid the price for love. And the little girl he rescued grew up to give me the best gift of all. A granddaughter who reminds me every day that love survives even after everything else burns away. If you want to know what Lily found inside the rebuilt house years later, hit subscribe, because the story didn't end there. 10 years after the fire, I thought every secret had already burned to ashes. But when my granddaughter Lily started renovating the old house I left her, she found something hidden inside the walls. Something I never put there. And when she called me crying, I knew the past wasn't done with us yet. My name is Margaret Thompson, and I'm 89 years old now. I moved into a quiet retirement home after the fire took everything. My husband, my peace, my sense of safety. Lily grew up fast after that. She became a teacher just like Miss Carter once was. When she told me she was buying back our old property, I smiled. I thought it would bring healing, but I never imagined what she'd uncover when she started tearing down the walls. Last week, Lily called me around midnight. Her voice was trembling. "Grandma, you need to come here. I found something in the wall behind your old bedroom." I told her to wait till morning, but she whispered, "No, you don't understand. There's a door, a small one, behind the wallpaper." My heart skipped. That wall had been rebuilt after the fire. How could there be a hidden door? When I arrived the next day, I saw it myself. A small square door behind the headboard, painted over, sealed shut, but real. On the handle, carved faintly into the metal, were 2 letters, H.T. Harold Thompson. My husband, Lily, had already called a carpenter to pry it open carefully. Behind the door was a narrow crawl space, dark, filled with dust, but intact. Inside there was an old trunk wrapped in cloth and rope. I knelt down, my hands trembling. The initials were burned into the wood. 2MT, when the truth is safe. We brought it out to the light and opened it. Inside were stacks of letters, neatly tied with faded blue ribbon, and a small black recorder, the kind people used in the 80s. Lily plugged in new batteries, pressed play, and we both froze as a familiar voice crackled through the static. It was Harold. "If you're hearing this, Margaret, then I failed to protect you from the truth. My brother found me again." My breath caught. "You'll hear things. Maybe they'll call me a liar, a thief, or worse. But I did everything to save you and Emma. He wanted revenge, not justice. I couldn't let him near our family again. I felt my knees go weak. The room felt smaller, heavier. Then came the sound of breathing closer to the mic. If I disappear, don't look for me. Promise me, Maggie. Keep them safe. And if one day Lily asks where she came from, tell her she was chosen by love, not blood. The tape ended with silence, except for one faint whisper. I'll be watching over you always. Lily sat beside me, speechless. Grandma? She said softly. He knew his brother would come back. I nodded, tears welling. He must have built this room before the fire, as a backup. Maybe he was planning to hide us here if things went wrong. We started reading the letters, each one addressed to me, but never sent. Some described dreams of rebuilding our family. Others revealed the truth about his brother. A man named Henry Thompson, jealous, unstable, and convinced that Harold had stolen his identity after the orphanage fire. Harold's last letter was written 2 days before he died. In it, he confessed that Henry had escaped a mental facility, and he feared he'd try to burn down everything connected to their past, even if it meant hurting me. That meant the night of the fire wasn't just about revenge. It was about erasing history. Lily noticed one more envelope, smaller, sealed with wax. On it were the words, "For Lily, when she's ready." She opened it carefully. Inside was a small silver locket and a letter in Harold's handwriting. It read, "Lily, if you're reading this, I may never meet you in this world, but I knew you would come. You are the proof that love can outlive blood, grief, and even fire. Protect your grandmother. Keep her stories alive, because that's how we stay with you." Lily started crying quietly. Then she opened the locket. Inside was a picture. One half of a family photo I thought was lost forever. It showed me Harold and baby Emma, the day we brought her home. The missing half was taped to the back of the letter. Together they formed the full image. Our family, complete again after 40 years. The next morning we took the trunk, the letters, and the recorder to the local museum. They agreed to preserve them as part of the town's history. A story of love, tragedy, and truth. For the first time in decades, I felt light, like the ghosts had finally gone quiet. That night, Lily stayed at my apartment. Before bed, she whispered, "Grandma, I think Grandpa's at peace now." I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart," because we finally told his story. The next day, as the sun rose, a faint smell of smoke drifted through the window. Not burning, but warm, comforting. And for a moment, I swore I saw Harold's silhouette in the light, smiling, not haunting us, watching over us. 10 years ago, a fire took everything from me. But today, those same ashes gave me my life back. My family, my peace, my truth. Sometimes the past doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to remind you what was worth saving. If you want to hear what Lily discovered inside the locket that changed everything again, subscribe to From Grandma Diary, because our story isn't finished yet. After we opened that silver locket my late husband left behind, strange things started happening in the house again. Footsteps, whispers, and a note appeared on my bedside table, in my handwriting. But I swear, I never wrote it. It's been 3 weeks since Lily and I found the hidden room in the old house. I thought we'd finally put the past to rest. We cleaned, donated what we could, and decided to keep the locket as a memory of Grandpa Harold. But the night Lily wore it for the first time, everything changed. It started with the sound of footsteps. Lily called me one night, her voice shaking. "Grandma, someone's walking upstairs, but the motion camera isn't picking up anything." I tried to calm her down. "Sweetheart, it's an old house. Maybe the wood's just settling." But then she whispered, "No, Grandma. The sound stops every time I stop breathing, like it's listening." The next day, she came to stay with me, and that's when I found the note. folded neatly on my nightstand. The paper was from my old recipe journal. The handwriting was mine, but the message wasn't. It wasn't him in the fire. Check the grave. My hands went cold. If that note was true, who did we bury as Harold Thompson? Lily thought it was a prank. Maybe someone trying to scare us. But I knew my old handwriting. I could recognize the curve of my letters anywhere. Still, I didn't want to believe it until I noticed something else. The date. In the corner of the note, faintly penciled in, was April 7th, 1985. That was the night before the fire. But that couldn't be. The journal that page came from had burned completely. Lily and I went to the town archives the next morning. I told her I needed to see my husband's death certificate. The clerk looked confused. "That file's sealed," she said. "By who?" I asked. "By a family member. A woman named Emma Thompson." My heart nearly stopped. Emma was my daughter, Lily's mother, who died in a car accident when Lily was only 6. But why would Emma have sealed Harold's records 20 years after the fire? We managed to get a copy after filing a request, and there it was. A chilling detail I'd never seen before. Under body identification, it said, "Dental records inconclusive. No photo, no personal effects, no fingerprints." The body had been burned beyond recognition. Lily frowned. "So, it could have been someone else?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. But in my chest, a quiet dread began to rise. A dread I hadn't felt since that night 40 years ago. We drove to the cemetery. Harold's grave sat near the willow tree, the same spot where Lily used to leave flowers every Father's Day. I stared at the headstone, my knees weak. The ground looked uneven, recently disturbed. Lily knelt and brushed the dirt gently. "Grandma, look. Someone's been digging here." My pulse quickened. Buried just beneath the surface was a small, rusted tin box. Inside was a Polaroid photo, burned at the edges, showing 2 men who looked almost identical. One was Harold. The other wore the same ring Harold always had, but on his right hand. And written on the back were 3 words: "You buried the wrong one." I nearly dropped the picture. Lily looked at me, horrified. "Grandma, do you think—" "I don't know," I said. "But I have to find out." That night I couldn't sleep. The words on the photo kept echoing in my head. At 2 a.m. the lights flickered. The temperature in the room dropped. And then, from Lily's room, I heard whispering. "Grandma," she called out softly, her voice trembling. I rushed in and froze. The locket around her neck was glowing faintly, a warm silver light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Take it off," I shouted, but she whispered, "It's not hurting me. It's talking." "What do you mean, talking?" Tears streamed down her face. She whispered, "It said, he's not dead." And then, as if answering her, a loud knock echoed from the front door. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. I walked toward it, every part of me shaking. When I opened the door, there was no one there. Only a letter slipped under the mat. It was sealed with black wax. On the envelope, "To Margaret, from HT." My husband's initials. Lily begged me not to open it, but I had to. Inside was a single piece of paper. "You were never supposed to see the fire. I needed you to think I was gone. Henry found me first. He took my place. Don't dig further, Maggie. Let the dead stay dead." My eyes filled with tears. Could it be true? Did Harold survive? And live hidden all these years? If so, where was he now? The last line made my blood run cold. "If Lily wears the locket again, I'll come home." I locked the letter in my drawer that night, but sleep wouldn't come. The wind outside howled like a whisper from the past, and I couldn't stop thinking, what if the man in that photograph, the one we buried, wasn't Harold, but Henry? Maybe the fire didn't end our story after all. Maybe it was just the beginning of the truth finally finding its way home. If you want to know what happened when Lily wore the locket again, stay with From Grandma Diary, because this isn't over yet. When Lily wore the locket again, I expected strange things to happen, but I didn't expect the truth, the real truth, to come knocking on our door. The truth that changed everything I thought I knew about my husband and about myself. I'm Margaret Thompson, and for the first time in 40 years, I'm starting to question my own memories. For years, I blamed the fire for taking Harold away. But now, after the letters, the photograph, and that message from HT, I can't tell what really burned that night. Lily couldn't stop thinking about the letter. "Grandma, if he's alive, we need to find him," she said. But every instinct in me screamed, no. I didn't want to open old wounds again. Still, she was determined. And when she put the locket back on, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not light, not fear, but a strange, quiet recognition in her eyes. Like a memory she shouldn't have. We started digging through public archives, newspapers, and old town records. That's when we found it. An obituary from 1987, 2 years after the fire. It was for a man named Henry Thomas, age 44, died in a car crash out of state. The photo was Harold's twin brother. Same face, same ring, but the middle name, Thomas, matched the HT signature on the letter. I remember whispering, "Oh God, what if it was Henry writing to me, not Harold?" Lily frowned. Then who sent the letter pretending to be him? That's when I noticed something in the handwriting. The letter G. Harold always looped it. Henry didn't. But this letter, the G was looped. My hands started shaking. Then that means... Lily finished my sentence. "He's alive." The next morning, Lily got a call from an unknown number. She put it on speaker. A man's voice said quietly, "Stop digging. It's better this way." Then hung up. We traced the call. It came from a hospital 2 towns away. Without telling anyone, we drove there that same afternoon. I asked the receptionist if a Harold Thompson had ever been admitted. She hesitated, typing something into the computer. Then she said softly, "There's a Harold T. listed here, but under a confidential care record. Are you family?" I nodded slowly. "I'm his wife." She led us down a quiet hallway to a small room with sunlight streaming through the window. Inside sat an old man, frail with deep scars on his arms. He turned as we entered, and when our eyes met, I couldn't breathe. "Margaret," he whispered. It was Harold, but not the man I remembered. Older, weaker, haunted. I fell to my knees. "They told me you died." He shook his head slowly. "I had to disappear, Maggie. Henry set the fire, but I was the one blamed. He told us everything. How he'd escaped through the back door before the house collapsed. How Henry had switched their IDs, forcing Harold to live as Henry Thomas to stay hidden. For decades, he'd been living under a different name in a veteran's home. He showed me the scar on his wrist, the one only Harold had, and then the ring, the same gold band I buried in the ashes." Lily started crying. "Grandpa!" "All these years." He nodded, tears rolling down his face. "I wanted to come back, but when I saw what the fire did to your life, I couldn't. You had peace. I didn't want to take that from you," I whispered. "You were all I ever wanted, Harold. I would have taken the pain just to have you." He held my hand. "You did, Maggie. You carried it for both of us." The doctor said he'd been diagnosed with dementia, and his memory was fading fast. But that day, he remembered everything. Every word, every promise, every moment we thought was gone. Lily stayed by his side, holding his hand as he told her stories of when she was a baby. Things only her real grandfather could know. Before we left, Harold pressed something into my palm. It was the locket. He smiled faintly. "You gave this to me the day Lily was born. I wanted her to have it back." As I held it, the chain felt warm. Not from light, but from life. Real. Present. That night, I sat by my window, listening to the wind outside. For the first time in 40 years, it didn't sound like ghosts. It sounded like home. They say time heals all wounds, but sometimes time just hides them long enough for the truth to find its way back. I lost my husband in a fire, but I found him again through the ashes of a lie. If you want to know what happened after Harold came home, stay tuned for the next story, only on From Grandma Diary. He finally came home after 40 years. The man I thought I'd buried, my husband, my love, my ghost. But the words he whispered before falling asleep that night changed everything I thought I knew about love, loss, and forgiveness. My name is Margaret Thompson, and I never believed in second chances. Not at my age. But the night Harold walked back through that door, I realized something. Sometimes life gives you one more chance to say goodbye properly. Bringing Harold home wasn't easy. He was weak, his memory fading, and the house that once held our laughter now felt foreign to him. He'd pause by the old hallway mirror, touch his reflection, and say softly, "It's strange seeing an old man looking back." Lily tried to help. She set up a small bed in the living room, where the light came in gently each morning. But the nights were hardest. He'd wake up calling my name, sometimes in fear, sometimes in love. One night he whispered, "Did we ever fix the window in Lily's room?" I froze. That window had shattered during the fire. He remembered everything, except that the fire was over. Each day I sat with him and told him our story, the parts he forgot, and the parts I had hidden away for decades. I told him about Emma's wedding, Lily's first day of school, the nights I cried into his old jacket. He listened quietly, his eyes watering. Sometimes he'd smile faintly and say, "You always did talk too much, Maggie." It was the same old teasing tone, the same gentle warmth. It felt like the years had folded back on themselves. One morning, Lily brought over a small wooden box. Inside was the locket, the one that had started everything. She handed it to Harold. "This belongs to you both," she said softly. Harold opened it and stared at the picture inside. Me, him, and baby Emma. He touched the image with shaking fingers. "I remember this day," he said. "The day I promised I'd never leave you." I smiled through tears. "And you kept that promise, just not the way we expected." That afternoon, while Lily was out getting groceries, Harold asked me to sit beside him. He reached for my hand. "There's something I never told you, Maggie." I braced myself. He looked down at his hands. The night of the fire, I saw Henry inside. He wasn't trying to hurt us. He was trying to save me. I frowned. "Save you? From what?" Harold took a deep breath. "From myself. I built that workshop without safety permits. The wiring was faulty. When the flames started, he ran in after me. We fought. I thought he was trying to kill me. But he was trying to drag me out." Tears blurred my vision. All those years I'd hated Henry, the man I thought destroyed my family, when in truth he'd tried to save it. Harold's voice cracked. "He died because of me. That's why I couldn't come back. I didn't want you to know that the fire wasn't his fault, or an accident. It was mine." I sat in silence, my heart breaking for the man beside me, and for the brother he had lost. But then I took his hand and said, "You spent 40 years punishing yourself for one mistake. Don't you think that's enough?" He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Do you forgive me?" I smiled. "I forgave you long before I knew the truth." That evening, Lily cooked Harold's favorite meal, chicken stew with thyme and fresh bread. We sat together, 3 generations under one roof again. The laughter felt awkward at first, then natural, then healing. After dinner, Harold asked for one last walk outside. I helped him to the porch where the wind carried the scent of rain. He looked up at the stars and said, "You know, Maggie, I used to think the fire was the end of our story. But now I see it was just a pause." I smiled. "We've waited long enough to press play again." He chuckled softly. "You always did have the last word." We sat there for a long time, holding hands. The air was cool, the night quiet. He leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered something so faint I almost missed it. "Thank you for waiting for me." That night, Harold fell asleep peacefully for the first time in years. His breathing was soft, steady, like the rhythm of our younger days. I watched him for hours, afraid to blink. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the room. He stirred slightly, smiled and whispered, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" I nodded, holding his hand tighter. "Yes, Harold, it finally is." He closed his eyes again, still smiling. And for the first time in 4 decades, I felt peace. Love doesn't always end with a goodbye. Sometimes it ends with a whisper, a hand held tight, and the quiet, knowing that you did your best. I spent half my life searching for closure. But maybe closure isn't about endings. Maybe it's about finally being able to let go. If you want to hear what happened the morning after Harold's final words, stay with From Grandma Diary, because every ending still has a story left to tell. The morning after he took his last breath, I walked into our room, and there, on his pillow, was something that made me fall to my knees. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a note. And what he wrote inside changed how I'll remember him forever. People think when someone dies, the story ends. But sometimes, that's when the real story begins. Because love doesn't vanish. It lingers, like the smell of morning coffee, or the way sunlight still hits their chair at 7 a.m. That morning, the house was too quiet. Lily was still asleep. I made tea, out of habit, 2 cups, before I remembered I didn't need to anymore. Grief is strange. You spend years dreaming of getting someone back, only to lose them again when you finally do. And now, standing there in the same house we'd rebuilt together, I didn't know what to do with my hands, my voice, my heart. The air still carried his cologne, faint but familiar. The blanket was folded halfway down, just as he'd left it before he drifted to sleep. And there, resting neatly on his pillow, was a small folded piece of paper. At first, I thought it was just a tissue, but when I picked it up, my fingers trembled. It was his handwriting, shaky but still his. On the front, it said, "For Maggie. Read this when the morning light comes." My heart pounded as I unfolded it. His scent was still on the page. Faint traces of ink and aftershave. The note read, "Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm finally resting. And you can stop worrying now. I've carried a lifetime of guilt on my back, and somehow you still chose to love me. You were my anchor, even when I was lost at sea. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't disappear when we're gone. It lives in the stories we leave behind. Tell Lily that her grandfather never stopped watching the stars for her. I'll be up there, making sure her light never fades." Harold, I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I just sat there, the note pressed to my chest, the tears coming like waves. He hadn't left me with silence. He'd left me with words, and somehow, that was enough. The days after his passing were quiet, but not empty. Lily stayed with me, sleeping in the spare room. Sometimes I'd hear her crying at night. Other times I'd catch her smiling at his photo, whispering something I couldn't hear. One evening, I found her sitting on the porch steps. She looked up and said, "Grandma, do you think he can really see us from up there?" I smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Sweetheart, love doesn't need eyes to see. It just knows." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. We sat there, the sky painted in gold and violet. For the first time, I felt Harold there. Not as a ghost, but as warmth, as peace. A week later, I went through his belongings. It was hard. Every drawer, every old photograph, every little scribbled note from years ago. Then, in the back of his closet, I found a small wooden box wrapped in a faded blue cloth. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each one addressed to me. But none had ever been sent. The earliest one was from 1986. He'd written, "I watched you and Lily from the distance today. I wish I could walk up that porch, hold you both and say I'm sorry. But I don't deserve to." Another read. "I tried to write every time I missed you. so I never forgot how much I had to come home for. Every letter was a piece of a broken man trying to rebuild himself in silence. By the time I reached the last one, my hands were trembling. It said simply, "If you ever find these, it means I made it home." That line broke me. He had written those words decades ago. But somehow, they found me when I needed them most. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took all his letters, placed them in the fireplace, and watched the flames dance, not to destroy them, but to set them free. I whispered, "You're home now, Harold. You can rest." The fire crackled softly, and I swear, I felt a hand brush against my shoulder, warm, familiar, loving. The clock struck midnight, the same hour his teacher had called me all those months ago. The hour everything began. But this time, it didn't bring fear. It brought peace. The wind outside shifted. The house creaked, almost like it sighed. And for the first time in 40 years, I slept without nightmares. Weeks turned into months. I planted a garden out back. Lily's his favorite. Lily helped me paint a small wooden bench right beside them. We carved his name into it. Harold Thompson, finally home. Every morning I sit there with my tea, reading his note one more time. The ink has started to fade, but the feeling hasn't. He's gone, but not lost. And neither am I, because life isn't about the people who leave. It's about the stories we carry after they're gone. And I'll keep telling ours, for him, for Lily, for anyone who has ever loved and lost and learned to keep living anyway. You know, people always ask me, "How did you do it, Grandma? How did you survive so much heartbreak?" I tell them the truth. You don't survive it. You grow around it, like a tree around an old wound. The scar stays. But so does the life. I still talk to Harold sometimes, when I water the lilies, when I fold his old blanket, when the wind moves through the curtains just right. Because maybe love isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about learning to let go, without forgetting. This house used to feel haunted. Now it feels full. Full of memories. Full of laughter. Full of peace. The ghosts are gone. Not because they left, but because I finally forgave myself enough to see them as love. If you've ever lost someone and still feel them close, stay with from Grandma Diary. Because not every goodbye means the end. After Grandma passed, I went through her things, quietly. Carefully. But when I opened her old Bible, something fell out. A yellowed envelope, sealed tight. And when I read what was inside, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, because it changed everything I thought I knew about my family and about her. My name is Lily Thompson, and my grandmother, Margaret, wasn't just a storyteller. She was the keeper of everyone's truth. The woman who held secrets so deep, even time couldn't dig them up. But she forgot one thing. Paper doesn't stay buried forever. After her funeral, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet. The clock ticked louder than it ever had. Every corner whispered her name. So I decided to clean her study. The one room she'd always kept locked until her last days. The smell of lavender and old books filled the air. On her desk sat her Bible, open to a random page. Psalm 91. Tucked between the pages was a sealed envelope. Brittle from age, it said, in her handwriting. For Lily. Read only when I'm gone. I didn't know whether to cry or run. I sat down at her desk, my hands trembling. The clock ticked once, twice, and I tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter, written in her familiar cursive. The ink was faded, but the words were still strong. My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, it means I've gone home. There's something I need to tell you. Something I couldn't say while I was still here. The story of our family isn't what you think. I frowned, reading faster. Your grandfather, Harold, wasn't my first love. I stopped breathing. Before him, there was another man. His name was Daniel. We met in 1959, when I was barely 19. He was kind, gentle, and lost, just like I was. But love back then wasn't as simple as it is now. Daniel came from a world my parents didn't approve of. They said if I chose him, I'd be disowned. So one night I packed a suitcase, ready to leave with him, but he never showed up. I waited 3 days at the train station before I gave up. Tears blurred my vision. My grandma, the woman who seemed so strong, so put together, had once been the girl left waiting at a station. The letter continued. A month later, I found out I was pregnant, but by then, I had no one and no courage to face the world. My parents sent me away to stay with relatives in another town. I gave birth to a baby boy. They told me he was stillborn, but years later, I found out he was alive. My jaw dropped. She had a son? They'd given him up for adoption without my consent. I tried to find him for years, but the adoption records were sealed, and by the time laws changed, it was too late. All I ever knew was that his new family moved to a town 2 states away. His name was changed to Henry. Henry! My mind went blank. Henry, the man Grandma always talked about, the one who died in the fire, wasn't her brother-in-law. He was her son. My heart pounded as I pieced the puzzle together. That's why Grandma had cried so hard when Henry died. That's why she'd kept his picture in her drawer all those years. And that's why Grandpa Harold could never talk about him. I looked around her study, the walls lined with family photos. Then I noticed something I'd never seen before. Behind one of the framed pictures of me as a child, there was a hidden compartment. Inside was a small notebook, the same one she used to write her diary in. I opened it. The first line read, "This diary belongs to Margaret Thompson, for Lily, when she's ready to know." I flipped through the pages. Some were filled with recipes, others with letters she never sent. And then I reached one marked in red ink. The night of the fire. She wrote, "I went to the workshop that night because Henry had called me. He said he wanted to tell Harold the truth. He couldn't live with the lie anymore. That he was our son, not Harold's brother. Harold had known for years but couldn't forgive me. When the fire started, they were arguing. Henry ran in to save Harold. I screamed for them both, but only one made it out. The truth hit me like a storm. All those years of silence, guilt, confusion, now they made sense. Harold had lived with that pain. Grandma had buried it, and both had loved Henry in their own broken way. At the bottom of the page, she'd written, "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that truth can burn, but lies destroy." I sat there for hours, staring at the open diary. Part of me was angry that she'd kept it hidden. Another part of me understood. Some secrets aren't meant to protect themselves. They're meant to protect the people we love. When Lily, me, finally stood up, I looked around the house one last time, and for the first time I didn't feel haunted. I felt connected to the pain, the love, and the truth that built this family. I took the letter, folded it gently, and placed it back inside the Bible, where it belonged. Not as a secret anymore, but as a story. That night I dreamt of her, Grandma, sitting by the lilies, smiling, sunlight on her face. She looked younger, lighter. She said, "Now you know, my darling. Now you can live freely." When I woke up, the house felt full again, and I realized Grandma didn't just tell stories. She was one. If you think every family has secrets buried deep, you're right. Stay with From Grandma Diary, because the next story might just be yours. I thought Grandma's story ended when she passed away, but when I published her diary, the one that carried every secret, every heartbreak, something happened I could never explain. Because the night before the book's release, I pressed play on her old tape recorder, and I heard her voice again, talking to me, like she knew this moment would come. I never wanted fame. I just wanted people to know her story, to remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. So I gathered every letter, every note, every piece of her handwriting, and turned it into a book. I titled it exactly how she always wanted, From Grandma's Diary. The first copies were set to arrive the next morning, but that night, something strange happened. I was cleaning her old study one last time. The same room where I'd found her letter inside the Bible months ago. On her desk sat her favorite thing in the world, an old tape recorder. It was dusty, but the tape inside was still labeled, in her handwriting. To Lily, play when you're ready. My heart started racing. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I wasn't ready to. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play, the tape whirred softly, and then I heard her, Grandma's voice, gentle, steady, and full of that warmth that could melt the coldest day. Hello, my darling Lily. If you're hearing this, it means you finally found your courage. I knew you would. My eyes filled with tears immediately. I don't know how much time has passed for you, but for me, it's probably been years since I last held your hand. I wanted to leave you something more than just stories. I wanted to leave you my truth. She paused for a moment. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock behind her, the one that still hangs in our living room. You see, Lily, life has a funny way of repeating itself. I spent my whole life writing stories, hoping someone would understand me. And now, I think that someone is you. I sat there frozen, hands covering my mouth, listening to every word. I know by now you've probably read the letter, the one in the Bible. I'm sorry for the secrets I kept. I thought hiding the truth would protect you, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe the truth doesn't destroy families. Maybe it heals them. Her voice cracked slightly, and I could almost see her smile through the pain. There's something else you should know, Lily. The stories in my diary. They weren't just about the past. They were lessons for you. She took a deep breath. When you're older, you'll learn that forgiveness isn't something you do once. It's something you practice every day, with others, with yourself. Tears rolled down my face. She'd recorded this knowing someday I'd need to hear it. And when you feel lost, when the world gets too heavy, go sit by the lilies. You'll find me there, always. The tape clicked softly, but it wasn't over yet. There was one more section. A faint whisper, like she leaned closer to the microphone. There's one last story I never finished writing, Lily. It's yours. You are the next page. Keep telling stories, not just mine, but yours. Because as long as someone listens, none of us are ever truly gone. The recorder stopped. Silence filled the room. I sat there holding that old device like it was gold. For a moment, I swore I could still hear her humming in the background. The same tune she used to hum while cooking dinner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about every story she'd told me. Every lesson, every tear, every laugh. She wasn't just my grandmother. She was the reason I believed in hope again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a knock at the door. It was the delivery truck. Boxes and boxes of her books stacked on the porch. From Grandma's diary. I opened the first box and pulled out a copy. The cover was soft beige, with her handwriting across the front. I ran my fingers over the title and whispered, "We did it, Grandma." Later that day, I held a small event at the local library, the same place she used to take me every Sunday. People came, neighbors, old friends, even strangers who had read her story online. When I finished reading the first chapter aloud, everyone was silent. Then a woman stood up, tears in her eyes. She said, "I lost my mother last year, and your grandmother's words made me feel like she was still with me." That's when I realized Grandma hadn't just left a story. She'd left a bridge, connecting her pain to someone else's healing. Months passed. The book spread farther than I could have imagined. First across our town, then across the country. People started sending letters to the P.O. box I created for her legacy. One said, "Your grandmother taught me to forgive my father." Another, "Her words saved my marriage." And one more, "I never met her, but I feel like I lost someone I knew." Every message reminded me, stories don't die. They live inside those who need them most. One evening, I visited the garden she'd loved so much. The lilies were blooming, white, soft, pure. I brought the tape recorder with me. I pressed play again just to hear her voice. This time it didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. Lily, if you're hearing this again, it means you're doing it. You're living. You're brave. And that's all I ever wanted for you. The wind blew softly through the lilies, and for a moment, just a moment, I heard her whisper in the wind. I'm proud of you, my darling. I looked up at the sky and smiled, because somehow I knew she was still telling her stories, just from a higher place. I closed the tape recorder and whispered, Rest now, Grandma. Your story's safe with me. Then I looked straight into the camera, if this were a video, and said, Her story started with heartbreak. It ended with hope, and maybe that's how all great stories should end. If you believe some voices never fade, stay with From Grandma Diary, because every ending is just the start of another story. It had been 3 months since Grandma's diary was published. Her story changed thousands of lives, including mine. But then one morning I opened my mailbox, and there it was, a letter. No return address, no stamp, just my name, Lily, and at the bottom of the envelope, one word written in trembling ink, Daniel. The same name Grandma whispered in her sleep when I was a child. I thought I knew every secret Grandma left behind. I thought the tapes, letters, and diary were the full story. But what I held in my hand that morning, it changed everything I thought I knew about her. Because inside that letter was something that didn't belong to me. It belonged to her past, a past that refused to stay buried. I opened the letter carefully. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, edges frayed. There were only 5 words written across the top. I never stopped loving her. And underneath, a photo. A young soldier holding Grandma's hand in front of a train station. On the back of the photo, summer 1958, before everything changed. My heart started pounding. I'd never seen this man before. And yet, Grandma's smile in that photo was different. Not the calm, gentle smile I remembered. It was wild, alive. I looked closer. The soldier's uniform had a faded insignia. U.S. Army, 1958. Daniel. The name she once mentioned when she told me, some love stories don't end. They just change shape. Who was he? And why would someone claiming to be him send me this now? Decades later, I searched through Grandma's diary again, looking for the name. On page 148, in her smallest handwriting, she had scribbled, Daniel, the one I never told Harold about. My stomach turned. Had Grandma loved someone else before Grandpa? The more I read, the more I found little traces of him. Small initials carved into page corners, hidden hearts, a pressed flower labeled 4D. She had hidden their love in plain sight. The next morning, I decided to trace the sender. The envelope had no address, but the handwriting looked shaky, old. Maybe written by someone in a hospital or nursing home. I took the photo to our local historian, Mrs. McCarthy, who'd known Grandma for years. When she saw the soldier, she froze. Lily, that's Daniel Turner. Your grandmother's first fiancé. I blinked. Her what? Mrs. McCarthy nodded. They were engaged before Harold came back from the war. But Daniel was drafted and never returned. Everyone thought he'd died overseas. My knees went weak. If that was true, then who sent the letter now? I found a small clue in the photo. The edge of a hospital wristband reflected in a mirror behind them. It had the code St. Agnes Vet's Wing, so I drove 2 hours out of town to St. Agnes Veterans Home. At the reception, I asked, Is there a Daniel Turner here? The nurse hesitated, typing the name slowly. Then she looked up. He's here, but he's in hospice. My chest tightened. She led me to a quiet room at the end of the hall, and there, sitting by the window, wrapped in a wool blanket, was a frail old man holding a copy of From Grandma's Diary. He looked up at me, tears welling in his cloudy blue eyes. You look just like her, he whispered. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I sat beside him, clutching the photo. Are you Daniel Turner? I asked softly. He nodded. I was once. He took a long breath. Your grandmother was the love of my life, Lily. But when I came home from service, I was told she'd married someone else. Harold. He looked down at the book in his hands. I found her words years later, online. I recognized the way she described the garden, the song she hummed. That's when I knew. She'd never forgotten me either. Tears blurred my vision. Daniel reached into his pocket and handed me something small. A silver locket. This belonged to her. She gave it to me before I left for the war. Told me to return it. When I came home, inside was a tiny photo of Grandma, smiling in the same dress as in the picture. On the other side, a note. If love is real, it will always find its way back. Daniel passed away 2 weeks later. At his funeral, I placed the locket on his chest before they closed the casket. And as I stood there, I realized Grandma's story wasn't about loss. It was about reunion, even if it took a lifetime. Later that night, I visited the garden again, the one filled with lilies. The wind was gentle, and for a moment I felt both of them there. Grandma and Daniel, finally together after all these years. I whispered, your story didn't end with goodbye. It ended with forever. When I returned home, I sat at Grandma's old desk and began writing again. This time, not as her granddaughter, but as the keeper of her legacy. I opened a new journal and titled it, Letters from the Ones Who Loved Her. Because maybe some stories are too beautiful to stay hidden forever. When you believe that true love never dies, stay with From Grandma Diary, because Grandma's story isn't over yet. I thought her story was over. I thought I'd heard every word, read every page, cried every tear. But last night, while cleaning the attic, I found one last box, and inside, a cassette tape, wrapped in a yellow ribbon, labeled in her handwriting, For When You're Ready, Lily. I pressed play, and Grandma's voice filled the room one final time. It's strange how hearing someone's voice after they're gone feels like time itself stops. Her tone was soft, trembling, but steady, like she knew this would be her last goodbye. If you're hearing this, Lily, she said, then I'm probably somewhere peaceful now. Maybe sitting by the garden, maybe watching you from the porch where I used to drink my tea. But there's one last story I never finished. One that belongs to all of us. I sat there frozen, the old cassette spinning slowly. Grandma continued, You've read my diary, you've seen my tears, but there's something I couldn't put in writing, because some truths need to be heard. Her breath caught slightly on the tape. It's about Daniel and Harold, and the choice that changed everything. My heart pounded. This was the truth she never told anyone, not even in her diary. Before I married Harold, she began, Daniel and I had a plan. We were going to run away after his leave ended. We'd saved up just enough money, and he'd promised to send for me. But then the telegram came. Missing in action. I waited for months, years, and when I finally stopped waiting, Harold was there. There was a pause, the kind filled with memories too heavy to describe. He loved me so deeply, Lily, and I did love him. But part of me always wondered if Daniel ever made it home, the tape crackled. The day you were born, Lily, Harold held you and said, She has your eyes. But I saw Daniel smile, and I knew, somehow, that love never really dies. It just changes hands. Years later, Grandma's voice went on. A letter arrived. It was from Daniel's sister. She wrote that he'd survived, but had lost his memory in the war. He lived in a small town under a different name. By the time I found out, he was married with a family of his own. A shaky sigh followed. I kept that letter hidden, not because I was ashamed, but because I'd already chosen my path. I chose to build, not to mourn. She chuckled faintly through her tears. Harold gave me laughter again. And Lily, you gave me purpose. Then her voice softened even more. But if Daniel ever finds you, if he ever sends a message, tell him I forgave him long before he left, and that I'll be waiting for him. Just like before, the tape clicked. Then a new tone began. Lighter, warmer. Lily, I know the world feels heavy sometimes, but promise me something. Don't spend your life waiting for perfect moments. Perfection is an illusion. The real beauty of life is in its cracks. That's where the light gets in. Her voice grew fainter, like wind through curtains. Take care of the house. Plant more lilies. And when you look up at the stars, remember, every story, even mine, ends in light. The tape hissed softly for a few seconds before clicking off. I sat there, motionless, tears streaming down my face. It felt like she'd spoken right through time. Not as a memory, but as a promise. That night, I went out to the garden with the tape in my hand, the same garden Grandma had built with Grandpa. The moonlight was soft, the lilies swaying gently in the cold air. I dug a small hole beneath the largest tree and placed the tape inside, wrapping it once more with the yellow ribbon. This is where your story began, Grandma, I whispered. And now, it's where it rests. But as I stood up, something caught my eye. A small engraving on the old wooden bench, faint but visible under the moonlight. 2 initials carved side by side, M+D, Margaret and Daniel. All these years, the truth had been sitting right there, in the open. I sat on the bench and looked up at the stars, feeling like she was there beside me. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt complete. Grandma's story wasn't just about heartbreak or loss. It was about love that survived everything. War, time, distance, even death. Because real love doesn't fade. It transforms. It lives on in memories, letters, gardens, and hearts that still beat because of the people who once loved us. The next morning, I placed a small plaque beside the lilies. It read, "Here blooms a story that never truly ended. And every time the wind passes through the garden, I swear I can hear her whisper, 'Thank you, Lily, for finishing what I started.' Call to action. 24/20. Ah, if this story touched your heart. Stay with from Grandma Diary, because love like hers never really says goodbye."